Hello. As Asima said, my name is Braxton, and I'm the Secretary of Women as Hero, and I just want to thank all of you again so much for coming out today. I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker, one of my newest personal heroes, Mrs. Courtney Klein Johnson. Courtney completed her undergrad and master's right here at ASU and went on to do truly incredible things. With a dream in her heart and the desire to create meaningful change, Courtney founded the nonprofit youth organization New Global Citizens, and most recently, the nonprofit SEEDSPOT, which helps local entrepreneurs make their dreams of social change a reality. She has been honored several times, including being named one of 20 women to change Arizona by 2020. Our club, Women as Hero, was lucky enough to have heard her speak before at one of our roundtable discussion meetings, and we were so inspired by what she had to say that we invited her back today to speak to all of you. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mrs. Courtney Klein Johnson.
Test these mics. Can you all hear me? How are you doing this morning? It's a quiet audience so far. Just a round of applause for the incredible 15 women pulled this together. I got it. I flipped it. So I'm incredibly honored to be here today. As Braxton mentioned, my name is Courtney Klein Johnson. I'm an Arizona native and a very proud alum of Arizona State University. So I was asked to share my story with you all this morning. I'm going to leave plenty of time for Q&A because that's oftentimes when the really juicy details come out. So feel free to ask questions, as these women can attest, and as anyone else that's ever heard me speak can attest. I am an open book. I will answer questions about anything. My role here is really just to serve in any way I can, as an inspiration, as motivation, as someone that's been there, done that. I can only speak to what I've been through. I'm by no means an expert in anything, but I have had a really unique experience in my early 20s that I'm going to share. So with that, I entered Arizona State University as a broadcast journalism major. I had aspirations of becoming Katie Couric. I wanted to live in New York on national television. And all through my high school and college career, everyone knew in the early days that I was going to be Katie Couric. Family, grew up in the East Valley of Arizona, my mother, relatives. Katie Couric was the destination for Courtney Klein. And after my freshman year in college, I traveled down to the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, and I lived in a rural village for the summer with 12 other college students. And the premise of our trip was to go down and work with a rural community that had just been devastated by a hurricane. And my perception as a young American walking into this community was that I was there to serve the community. And I think oftentimes we have this misperception about the role of international development and the role that we can play as Americans. And I was shaken by the fact that this community that I entered into was the richest community that I'd ever been a part of. And by American standards, they had absolutely nothing. We slept in hammocks, we showered in the rain, we burned our toilet paper. It was an incredibly primitive environment considering the fact that the hurricane had just come through. And what shook me the most was that the hope that resonated in the soil, in the palapa huts, just in the DNA of the people there was hope. And they believed in a different future for their community. And so as I was there with these other college students, it was how do we play a role in impacting this community? And so we rebuilt homes and we repaired a school and we served as translators in medical clinics. But beyond that, it hit something really deep in my core and understanding that I was 18 years old and I grew up in a middle-class family in America, and I'd never seen or experienced a community as rich as this one. And it was a community that many may not ever say had anything to offer. And I was shaken by the fact that this was the richest, most incredible community and the most amazing people that I'd ever been around. And so I came back to the States with this notion of still becoming Katie Couric, and I thought, how does this all make sense? And oftentimes, I think, particularly as women, we have an expectation on ourselves as to what we will become and what other people expect of us. And so breaking that norm for me was incredibly challenging. And you can imagine coming back to my mother and telling her that, Mom, I may not become Katie Couric. In fact, I may not enter broadcast journalism at all. On the back of the barf bag on the flight home, I jotted down this idea, the notion that ideas can start anywhere. I wrote down, what if? What if there was an organization that would educate other young people about what was happening in other parts of the world? And what if we empowered young people in this country to take action at a young age? We didn't have to wait until we were 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 to actually change the world. We could do it at 15, 16, 17, or even younger. What if? What would the world look like if young people knew what was happening in other parts of the world, felt deeply connected to those communities, and could create change? So I marched back into my fall semester, sophomore year at ASU, and I changed my major. And I met with the professor who was running the nonprofit management program and informed that professor that I wanted to change my major for the sole purpose of starting a nonprofit organization when I graduated. And that professor looked at me and said, well, that's great. Lots of students say they want to start a nonprofit organization, but very few of them actually do. It's a really hard road. And I thought, it's kind of a downer. Why would you doubt? I just came off a plane. I've been in the Yucatan. I got this barf bag. You got to believe in a girl with a dream. And it shook me a little bit to think that there was this doubt, but we all face doubt, right? Oftentimes when the dreams are the biggest, the most doubt comes. And so I changed my major anyway. I studied nonprofit management here at ASU for the next 3 years. And during my senior year, the Edsons had made a $5.2 million contribution to ASU to invest in the Edson Student Entrepreneur Initiative. And for those that don't know, the Edson Student Entrepreneur Initiative is all about funding students that have a dream of creating an organization or a for-profit entity. And I submitted the idea of this organization to the Edson Student Entrepreneur Initiative. The promise was that you could qualify for $20,000 office space and a mentor, which to a senior in college meant the dream could live. So I submitted the application. They came back and said, Courtney, we're really not quite sure we're going to fund nonprofit organizations this first round. We're really interested in for-profits with a sustaining model. I said, you don't understand. I have to do this. Please consider the application. I'm a firm believer that when a door closes, if there's enough pressure in the house, the windows will open. And so with the windows open, I crawled in and made sure that the application made it to the final round. And when we got the phone call after the interview for the final round, it was, congratulations, Courtney. We didn't think we'd fund nonprofits, but you've been fully funded. $20,000 office space and a mentor. Cloud 9, called the mom, got funding, mom, don't worry about it. Went into the office 3 weeks later, and in the interim, I had turned down all of the backup job offers I was out for. Just in case the funding didn't come through, I certainly didn't want to graduate without a job. So I called the American Red Cross, I called Big Brothers Big Sisters, I called the Boys and Girls Club and say, listen, not going to pursue the path anymore, got funding from ASU. As I went into the office to sign the official paperwork, the very kind gentleman sat across the table from me and said, congratulations, Courtney, we're giving you $1,000 office space and a mentor. And I said, does the $19,000 come in over time? Do I have to sign a particular piece of paperwork? What happened to the $20,000? He said, I'm really sorry. There must have been a misreading on the computer screen. We're only giving you $1,000 office space and a mentor. It's really shocking to a girl that just turned down all of her backup job offers, has already devastated my mother and half the family for not becoming Katie Couric, and I only have $1,000 office space and a mentor to build this dream on. And so I walked out of the office and entered Mill Avenue, and I'll never forget the moment, and I thought, am I going to do this? And there's oftentimes this question that we probe to ourselves, am I capable? Is this really the time? Am I ready now? And I remembered that professor and kind of the thorn in the side, and I said, I have to do this. I have to do this. And so I went out for the next 6 months and recruited any type of support I could get my arms around. Thankfully, the university, the mentor that was assigned to me was Dr. Laddie Kaur, which is the former president of ASU. Imagine Michael Crow being your mentor. Not a bad mentor to get. So with Laddie's support, I went out and talked to law firms, banks, accounting firms, graphic design agencies, marketing agencies, and said, my name's Courtney Klein, 21-year-old, have a dream, can you help? And over those 6 months, recruited $130,000 of donated services. Free legal, free accounting, free graphic design. And it wasn't necessarily anything to do with anything aside from the fact that I had a dream and I believed in it. And that's often where incredible change happens in the world, is just having a dream and believing that it can be possible. So I then called my alma mater, knowing that we had to start somewhere. We had to build a pilot program. And so I called Mesa Public Schools and again said, here's the dream. I need to pilot this in a few high schools here to prove the model. Can you help? They said, sure. I'm not quite sure to this day why they said yes, but they did. And we went out and educated high school youth about creating change. We knew we had to start on a local level, and by we, me, and a team of college interns that were unpaid at the time, went out and recruited these 4 high schools to participate in the program. And so the idea was that students would go out, identify a problem in their own community, and change it. So the story that I often tell is at Westwood High School. We had a team of 20 students at Westwood High School, met after school as an extracurricular program. identified a problem in their backyard. And that problem was a traffic intersection at Westwood University. And to turn left at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at Westwood University, you would wait at least 20 minutes to get out of campus. 3 schools on the street, no left-hand turn signal, parents running red lights, kids crossing the street, highly dangerous, had been that way for a good 15 years. Nobody had done anything about it. Everyone complained about it. Students went out, they documented the intersection, took photographs, videography, and they went and made a presentation to Mesa City Council. Any of you born and raised in Mesa, incredibly conservative city council, at least a few years ago it was. And our 20 students walked into Mesa City Council with our t-shirts on, black, that said "Join the Movement" across the front of them. The city council meetings are televised on that, channel 99 or whatever it is. City council was terrified, like literally rolling back in their chairs, like, who are these students and what are they here to talk about? They made a presentation, very compelling. City council looked at them and said, we'll go out and do our own assessment and we'll get back to you. Well, they indeed went out. 2 transportation commissioners were out on site the very next day, documenting the intersection, doing time trials. 3 days later, they called our team of students, one student in particular, the team leader, and said, all right, we've been out on site, we've documented the intersection, you're right, there's a problem. Here's the change we're thinking of making. Is it satisfactory? Can you imagine being like a 50-year-old transportation commissioner calling a 15-year-old in a homeroom class asking if your solution is satisfactory? The students called back and said, because he had to leave voicemail, of course, the student was in class, called back and said, no, your solution is not acceptable. And until you get a certain number of cars to that intersection, we're not going to stop. So the students went back to Mesa City Council, met with the vice city mayor, 2 transportation commissioners, and 3 city council. And as they walked out of that meeting, Channel 10 News was there, and the intersection was changed 3 days later. That, in a microcosm, proved that if you gave young people the power to create change in the world, they could, and they would do it over and over again. So the question for me at the time was, how do we take this model and scale it? All 3 other high schools had great results the first year. So we went out and recruited corporate support early on. I actually see Renee Levine, who just left the room. Intel was one of our very first supporters, gave a $3,000 check, and SRP gave $3,000. $6,000, still not enough to scale the organization, but it was at least a start. So I came back to ASU and spoke at the Pat Tillman leadership class here. Pat Tillman Foundation had just launched their leadership course here, and you never know who's going to be in the room, so I gave the presentation, as you've all heard it. And there was a representative from the foundation in the room and said, we're looking to launch a high school program in San Jose, California, Pat Tillman's hometown. We'd love to consider you to potentially expand there. Are you interested? I said, be happy to talk. I was on a plane 2 days later. They don't slow down, and I certainly move fast. And so I went up to San Jose, California, met with the entire board of directors for the Pat Tillman Foundation. And to make a long story short, at the age of 22, after the pilot program had launched, I got the phone call, and the Pat Tillman Foundation invested $500,000 in the idea. Shortly, thank you. Shortly after that, Social Venture Partners invested about $200,000. And Social Venture Partners is a model investing both capital as well as human capital, financially, and human capital is their model. And so we received $200,000 over a 5-year period from Social Venture Partners. So here I am, 22, pilot program successful, scaling to San Jose, California. We have capital. I hired 2 staff. I'd never hired staff before. I'd never really managed before. I myself had really never been managed before. You can imagine the deep, dark, black hole of questioning and doubt. And what I learned through that early stage, and what I'm still learning today, is that it's really easy to doubt yourself, but there are plenty of other people that will do that for you. And so never doubt your abilities. We did expand to San Jose, California. We launched 6 high schools there, 6 high schools in Arizona, again, keeping it small. We had another successful year, great results and stories that I can tell all day long. But the real question was still, how do we take the local model and go global? And so I was sitting that second spring semester after we'd run a year and a half worth of programming, questioning how do we really grow to a global scale? How do we affect communities internationally and do it in a holistic way that's not a top-down American approach that we're coming in and solving problems, but that we're working with local social entrepreneurs around the world. And so ironically and serendipitously, a high school in San Jose, California was profiled in a newspaper article. And as I turned the page from our student being profiled, there was an article about another organization called Youth Philanthropy Worldwide, and that organization was started by Esther Hewlett of the Hewlett-Packard family. I read the article, and their mission was to educate young people about global issues and connect them with partner projects in the developing world. Well, that's shocking. I'd never seen this organization before. I thought I'd done my due diligence and homework before I started the organization to see if anyone else was already out there. And there was this kind of synchronicity between these 2 organizations, and I was devastated on some respect that there was already someone out there doing it. I was elated, on the other hand, that I wasn't the only crazy person that thought this was possible or reasonable and needed in the world. And so I called the executive director. on Monday morning, and I said, again, Courtney, running an organization out of Phoenix, here's what we do. She said, that sounds really familiar. I said, yeah, I think we should talk and figure out some way to work together. She said, well, I'm leaving for India on Thursday. I'll be back after visiting some of our partner projects in the middle of the summer, and perhaps we can meet then. And I said, well, today's Monday, you leave Thursday. I said, I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. So I flew to San Francisco, California, and met with the executive director at the time. She, in the process, had gathered her board of directors, which was chaired by Esther Hewlett, the Hewlett-Packard family. And I walked in, and we talked for 9 hours. It was a very long afternoon leading into evening. And we decided over the course of time that we had enough complementary things that we would explore a merger. To make a long story short, we ended up merging the two organizations together in 2008. The organization started here in Phoenix, acquired Youth Philanthropy Worldwide, and we became what is now New Global Citizens. And the premise behind New Global Citizens to this day, and what Youth Philanthropy Worldwide had that we did not, was partnerships with grassroots social entrepreneurs all around the world. So New Global Citizens now partners with organizations like Ashoka, Global Fund for Children, International Development Exchange, Global Fund for Women, etc., empowering students in this country to become aware of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals and take those very same skills of community education, advocacy, and fundraising and do that body of work still here in the United States as well as on behalf of partner projects in the developing world. So how that works, we had a high school team a few years ago in New York that was really passionate about education. They looked for issues of education within their own community, and they also looked globally. They decided that they wanted to partner with an entrepreneur in India who was building train platform schools. In India, oftentimes children are on the train platforms begging for a means to support their families opposed to going to school. And that entrepreneur in India draws a chalk circle at 8 o'clock every morning on the train platform. And so long as the children are inside that chalk circle by 8 a.m., they receive an education, a shower, and a meal for the day. That entrepreneur's challenge was that she didn't have the resources to move equipment because she would do the schools in stages, so an 8 a.m. school, a noon school, and an evening school. And she needed to move her supplies back and forth as well as support the expansion of the program across the country. So the team of high school students in New York raised enough money, did enough advocacy work, and educated their community to the point that they were able to purchase a bus in India to now move these train platform schools all throughout a certain part of New Delhi. And so for us, it was about connecting young people and the resources and ideas that they have to entrepreneurs around the world. So New Global Citizens, as it stands today, is in 14 states across the country, working in partnership with communities in 33 countries around the world. Where it becomes interesting is when I came back from the merger and when we had just finished the merger process, we held a luncheon here at at the Biltmore. And the way that came about was through a gentleman by the name of Jerry Bisgrove. And I'm a firm believer that people come into your life for certain reasons. And as I share the story of New Global Citizens, it's all been about relationships. And the story of Jerry Bisgrove and meeting him and how the organization has continued to grow is in large part due to him, was through an introduction through ASU. And Jerry Bisgrove was in a room, and I saw Jerry across the way and thought, this is Jerry Bisgrove, very iconic leader in my mind. He's one of the largest philanthropists in Arizona, kind of a Bill Gates in my world. And I thought, I want Jerry to be part of the continued success of this organization, and how do we make that work? So I went up to Jerry, and he'd heard me just share a snippet of a story at this luncheon. And he pulled out his wallet as I approached him, and he said, I really like what you had to say, kid. He called me kid. And I said, well, thanks, Jerry. He said, I want to help. What card can I give you, the business card or the credit card? And Jerry, to this day, I'm sure, was quite serious about both. And I looked at Jerry and I said, I'll take the business card. And I took the business card and I went into Jerry's office a few weeks later. And as Jerry was out in the community, he was kind of this big teddy bear of a guy. You just kind of want to squeeze his cheeks. And I walked into his office and he was sitting in this huge high leather rollback chair and he pushed a button on his desk and the door closed. 24 years old at the time, a little intimidated. He said, what can the Stardust Foundation do for you? Straight to business. Don't know if he had a bad day, don't know if he didn't want to, I don't know what it was. He said, what can the Stardust Foundation do for you? And he said, well, Jerry, I'm sure that you get asked all the time for money. What I'm really interested in is continuing to build this organization based on the capacity of Arizona. And I want introductions to more people that can help make this possible, because it's not cash that makes ideas come to life. It's people. And Jerry said, I like that. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll host a luncheon for you. I'll invite a few of my friends, and we'll see what happens. I was like, great, Jerry. Sounds perfect. I walked out of there like 7 minutes later. It was the shortest meeting I've ever had in my life. I show up at the Biltmore about a month and a half later, and Jerry, as promised, has invited a few of his friends, which, oh, by the way, happens to be the heads of major corporations in Arizona and major foundations. So Piper, Pulliam, Intel, APS, US Airways, and me. And Jerry says, hey, I want you to listen to her story. I think we should support it. We raised $180,000 at that luncheon from 16 people and corporations and foundations. And after that, I went back to Jerry's office, and he said, how do you think that went? I said, Jerry, that was spectacular. Thank you for opening up your Rolodex of friends for me to meet. And he said, I want to underwrite a luncheon for you for the next 5 years. You can invite however many people you want, and I'll pay for it. And that spun out to us raising roughly $500,000 the subsequent year. And that trend continued over the 5 years that I was still with the organization. And so as I considered my own life cycle with the organization, I think there's an end to any entrepreneurial journey. Some, like Wendy Kopp, Teach for America founder, have been with it for over 20 years. And I wasn't quite sure what my life cycle looked like. What I did know was that I'm a kind of fire starter. I like to start things. I like to build things. I like to see the fire burning really strong. But I'm not the person that's going to continue to fuel it with wood. And that was an important recognition that I had of myself when I started to hit roadblocks and realizing that this organization has scaled very quickly. We're in a stable place. We have staff. We have operations. We're scaling at a steady pace. The board's built. Funding's in line. What next? What next do we do? And so the final challenge that I had for myself before I could ever think about leaving the organization was making sure that financially it could be in the strongest possible place. And so in 2009, I came to the board of directors and said, I really want to build an endowment for this organization. Pocket of money that will be invested in the market, that will turn off earnings year over year, and will have at least some financial base for the organization to live on. And the board looked back at me in 2009 and said, you're crazy. Organizations aren't building endowments right now. Most organizations are closing their doors. And I said, we just need to find a way. Over time, it may take us 3 years, we're going to build an endowment. I kid you not, 2.5 weeks later, I'm a firm believer that you throw an intention out to the world and good things happen. 2.5 weeks later, I got a phone call from the Arizona Community Foundation. Jim Potofsky, representative there, said, Courtney, we have a donor at the Arizona Community Foundation who's looking to build an endowment for a nonprofit organization that's working with young people, that has ties to the East Valley of Arizona, which is where we started, has some sort of servant leadership, teaching young people to do good things in the world. Ideally, this donor would like there to be some sort of national expansion. And the icing on the cake for this donor is some sort of global impact. I was like, Jim, seriously? I was like, I think that's us. And he said, well, we're actually inviting 20 organizations to apply. There's lots of creative programs out there that are looking to expand and scale. And we'd love for you to submit an application. It's like, great. Submit the application. Felt like a lifetime to wait. Got the phone call. You've made it to the next round, made it to the next round, made it to the next round. It was like a 6-month process. They flew in national thought leaders to look at proposals. And it was this buildup of thinking this could be it. I mean, this could be the end of the dream, for me at least, not the end of the organization, but for me, this could solidify everything that I've ever dreamed possible for this organization, everything I ever had on my vision board of what I could create inside of this organization. And so we got the call and we made it to the final 2. And I'll never forget preparing for that final interview at the Arizona Community Foundation. And I'll never forget riding the elevator. And I'll never forget turning the hall to the right and then the left again. And as I walk down this final corridor, I'm thinking to myself, my heart beats still to this day, is this it? And who in the world is this other organization that we're up against? And do we have a shot? And as I turned that final corner, the representative from the other organization was walking down the hall. And who was it but the professor that told me that it wasn't possible to start a nonprofit organization? ASU, College of Public Programs, was the final applicant with us. And I walked into that interview and I was like, here it is. Everything on the line, dream, belief, students, alumni, here's the vision. Take it or leave it. And I walked out of there feeling like, that's it. That's all I can do. And I traveled shortly after that. It was the first vacation I had taken in 6 years with my now husband. I took him to a Baltimore Orioles game, of all places to take your first vacation. And we're sitting front row at the Baltimore Orioles final 2 games of the season. And I'm frantically always addicted to my phone, but particularly at this time just waiting for the call. And all of a sudden, right before the 7th inning, phone rings. Arizona Community Foundation. You've never seen a girl haul so fast up a flight of stairs. And I get into the foyer area of the stadium, and I'm trying to be professional with screaming fans behind me, and I was like, this is Courtney. And it was Jim Potofsky, and he said, Courtney, I understand you're on vacation. I'm proud that you're taking a vacation, is what he said. And he said, I just wanted to call and let you know that you've been awarded the $1 Million Endowment. So we got the $1 Million Endowment, and I wrote a thank you to the professor. I did, for challenging me in early days to believe that it wasn't possible. And it was, and it is. And to all of you, the dreams that you have, I believe that every one of us has this kind of raspberry seed inside of us. If you've ever had a raspberry seed lodged in your back molar, you know the feeling, right? There's like this seed back there that you're like kind of gnawing at all day long, and you're like trying to get out, but you kind of don't want to get it out because it's entertaining you. It'd be easy to chew a piece of gum. But there's this raspberry seed, right? And all of us, there's a raspberry seed. And in whatever facet you find it, at whatever point in your life you find it, don't ignore it. Thankfully, I found another raspberry seed. I left New Global Citizens in 2010. My dream was to inspire other entrepreneurs to pursue their dreams. And so I opened an organization with a colleague and a dear friend called SEEDSPOT, ironically named, and we provide support for early-stage social entrepreneurs in Arizona. We are exclusively supporting Arizona entrepreneurs. We believe it's possible to create organizations, corporations, institutions that make the world a better place, regardless of your legal structure. So we had 191 entrepreneurs apply for our first program this past year. We currently support 56 early-stage entrepreneurs. They will all graduate from our program on May 17th. They are life-changing organizations and corporations. You can log on to seedspot.org and read all about them. I work in an incredibly inspiring environment every day around entrepreneurs and dreamers. And so for what it's worth, I encourage you all to not ignore the raspberry seed at any point in your life and to pursue it relentlessly and build relationships with people that can help you get there. So thank you for having me today.